Hi everyone. Hope you're doing okay. Um, welcome to my house, and welcome to this little video of All's Well That Ends Well, Act Four. And I hope you don't mind me looking down a bit. I'm going to be looking at my book a bit, and I want you to follow along in your book as well. I'm going to use act, scene, and line numbers. So follow along, and I just want to give you a kind of an overview of the play or of this act. By the way, the picture up there is from the folio, which we talked about earlier in the semester, and that's the first page of the play. And I'm not sure if I can zoom in or anything on that. I guess I can't. I'm getting used to this software. Okay. So in the act, what happens? I'm going to move myself over there. I guess you could say, I mean, of course, lots and lots of things happen, but I'm trying to simplify it a little bit. First of all, kind of going chronologically, Paroles is, if you remember, he's Bertram's servant. He's unmasked as the conflict in Tuscany comes to an end. So, of course, we're in Italy for pretty much this whole act. Remember, in Act 3, we were in both Rossillon in France and we were in Italy in Tuscany, where the fighting's going on between Florence and Siena. But in this act, we're in Tuscany the whole time, mainly in Florence, where Bertram is fighting for the Florentines, and this little plot about Parole is kind of comes to a head in Act 4. So if you look at Act 4, Scene 1, for example, it's pretty much the two lords talking about how they're going to put their plan forward to get Paroles to embarrass him in front of Bertram, to unmask him, and then scene 4-3, of course, is scene 3 is when it all happens, and it's quite a long scene. Where Paroles essentially spills the beans, and tells Bertram kind of what he secretly really thinks of him. I'm wondering if you can see this cursor moving around. I think you probably can. So that's the first thing that happens, and of course he does get unmasked, and he says that Bertram's a bad guy, and he says that the lords are horrible. Kind of a little bit of irony there. They're the guys who captured him, and he's probably nastier about those two than he is about Bertram. Here's some other big things, though. The second big thing is that Diana, this is Act 4, Scene 2, Diana, she meets with Bertram and agrees to sleep with him. Of course, we know that she's doing this because Helen has asked her to do so, and we know that Helen's plan is for Diana to get the ring and to get Bertram to sleep with her. But as we find out, Diana puts some kind of an interesting spin on it by saying that, yes, you can sleep with me, but first of all, of course, it's got to be in the dark, and then after we've finished, you need to stay here and not say anything for an hour. I suppose he's so excited that he doesn't say. That's pretty strange. And he agrees to do it, and she also says she's going to put a ring on his finger, just as she gets a ring from him. So that's going to be an issue. Well, keep an eye on that ring, or remember that ring she's going to put on his finger in the dark. Of course, we know that it's not going to be her; it's going to be Helen, because Helen came up with the plan at the end of Act 3. Scene 4 is, of course, Helen leaving for Rossillon. It's a very small scene, and she leaves with Diana and Diana's mother, the widow, and I mean, I'm not saying she isn't a widow, she is, but that's her name, and that's pretty much scene 4. That the war is over. We already knew that from the Lords talking about this in Act 4, Scene 1. And now everyone's essentially converging on Roussillon, including the king, actually, who we also find out is going there. So that's where Helen's going. Of course, everybody thinks that Helen is dead because of certain letters she sent. So they're obviously going to go to Roussillon and surprise everyone in Act 5. Although we do go to Roussillon at the end of Act 4, the very last scene of the act. Lafeu and the Countess are talking, and Lafeu, who everybody now thinks that Helen is dead, Lafeu and the Countess agree that Helen was terrific, but I suppose they move on. I don't think we're supposed to think they're bad for that, but Lafeu offers the Countess his daughter, and they await Bertram coming back from Italy, because the fighting between Florence and Tuscany is over. So that's what happens. Let's have a look at some other stuff. A couple of things I think are important about Act 4. I think the character of Parolles is pretty interesting. Here's some quotations on the right-hand side. The Lord in Act 4, Scene 1 says about Parolles, here he comes to beguile 2 hours in a sleep, and then to return and swear the lies he forges. Because the Lord is seeing Parolles come on stage looking for his drum, the drum that they've sent him off to look for. And the Lord is highly skeptical that Parolles is really going to do anything. He's just going to wander around for 2 hours in a bit of a fog and then just make up a bunch of stuff about how he couldn't find the drum. Generally speaking, of course, the Lord and Bertram don't. Well, at this point, Bertram has agreed with the Lords that Parolles is just a liar, is a coward, is a fool, and not really worthy of being his servant. And a lovely line or a phrase, Act 4, Scene 3, Bertram calls him this counterfeit module. I just love that phrase. But at the same time, I think Parolles shows a kind of more complex side to himself. And, you know, we talked about this in class a little bit. How much is Parolles really all those bad things? I mean, I suppose he probably is some of them. He himself, this is the third quotation on the page, he says about the Lords, they begin to smoke me. I find my tongue is too foolhardy, but my heart has the fear of Mars before it. Which is interesting, you know, he's saying, you know, he can sense that they're finding him out, which of course shows that he knows he's sort of guilty, like he knows he's a bit of a fool, he knows he's a bit of a braggart, he knows he's a bit of a windbag. As he says here, my tongue is too foolhardy. But I think this is cool too. My heart has the fear of Mars before it, suggesting, you know, in spite of knowing that he's wrong to be like that, he's sort of worried about he's more worried about being found out in a way, and he sort of has to press on. And you sort of see that kind of indomitable spirit a bit after he's been shown up and embarrassed and essentially shamed by all the others. He's left on stage at the end of Act 4, Scene 3, and he has a soliloquy, right, where he talks to the audience and he says, really openly, Captain, I'll be no more, but I will eat and drink and sleep as soft as Captain shall. Simply the thing I am shall make me live. And there's something quite almost dignified about that, you know, kind of, I'm just going to be who I am. I'm going to continue to be Parolles. I'm going to continue to be this guy. I will eat and drink. Life will go on. I will sleep as soft as any captain will. So surprisingly confident, even after he's been shamed by these others. And you kind of wonder whether Shakespeare feels a little bit of sympathy for Parolles here, and perhaps we should be sympathetic to him too. How much should we really like these lords? Certainly Bertram isn't very appealing. And the two lords have their moments, when they criticize Bertram, which they do at the beginning of Act 4, and they're not very happy about his treatment of Diana. I'm sorry, that's the beginning of Act 4, Scene 3. We quite like those lords, I think, but they're also sort of generally part of this courtier class who the king has criticized, and they are in sort of cahoots with Bertram. So I don't know. I wonder if Shakespeare wants us to see kind of two sides to this. That Parolles, yeah, he's annoying, but perhaps there's something actually a little admirable about his spirit. Finally, of course, this act is important for the idea of courtly love. It's all through it goes all the way through the play. Not sure where to put my head here. Let's put it over. Sorry, let's put it over here. So there's a picture here of a knight kneeling to a lady, and she's giving him his helmet, like a sort of ceremony. It looks like there's also sort of a swan maybe on top, which is maybe that's a bonus prize for him. But certainly he's on his knees, he's submitting to her, she is in a position of power over him, and this is all kind of the pose of courtly love. This actually is from a manuscript from 1340, right in the middle of the medieval period, and it's French, bonus, as are the characters in this play, or most of the characters. So just to remind you, courtly love is about, this is on the right-hand side here, is a literary convention where the man submits to or serves a woman. He sees the woman as cruel or even manipulative, and he fully doesn't really expect to have. I mean, he would love to have the love returned, but it's almost like you expect it isn't going to happen. Love is unrequited, and so love is almost like a kind of a bondage, right? A kind of you feel constrained by the woman who you're just desperately in love with. Bertram, here's this, I love this great exchange. Bertram speaks in the language of courtly love, and he says, I love thee by love's own sweet constraint, and will forever do thee all rights of service. And I think I think Shakespeare is definitely giving him words that sound almost stereotypical. They're not particularly interesting. They are cliches for that time and for years before Shakespeare, during the medieval period. I'm constrained by love. I will do you all rights of service. And like many times in this play, Bertram's words sound a bit like something he's heard somewhere else. He's learned how to speak like this. They're not particularly original. They're not particularly imaginative or fresh. Diana's reply, by contrast, is quite fresh and quite striking and very strong. And she says to him, so you serve us till we serve you. So Shakespeare punning there on the word serve, which means sex as well. So you make love to us, or the other way around. You serve, you're on your, you do this courtly love thing until we have sex with you. And then when you have our roses, and she kind of throws back the language of courtly love at him by saying, you talk about roses and stuff, but actually when you've taken our rose, of course, rose, chastity or honesty, another word in the play, or virginity, you barely leave our thorns to prick ourselves and mock us with our baseness. So you leave us with, in fact, no way of criticizing you. You've sort of taken our most cherished thing away from us. And we know elsewhere in the play, chastity is seen as so important to the women in the play because they know it's perhaps the only power they have. And so she says, therefore your oaths are words. They're just nothing but words. Your promises are just words. They're empty. Well, I hope this was useful to you. And I'll make some more of these and see if it helps. Thanks everyone.